Staring at my reflection in the office bathroom, I wiped away tears. I refused to let fall in front of everyone. 5 minutes earlier, my boss Derek had stood before our entire department, his arm around Julia's shoulders. "She's our future. Not you," he'd announced, smirking as he compared her 3 months of work to our years of dedication. We packed our personal items in silence that afternoon, wondering what made her so special. None of us imagined we'd discover the truth just 4 weeks later. My name is Peggy Walker, and until recently, I was the marketing director at Summit Creative Solutions, a position I'd worked incredibly hard to earn over 5 years with the company. At 32 years old, I'd built a reputation in our industry for innovative campaigns and client relationships that transformed struggling brands into market leaders. My office wall displayed 3 industry awards for excellence in digital marketing strategy, and my desk drawer held dozens of thank you cards from clients whose businesses had grown under my guidance. But what I valued most was the team I'd built. Amanda Fletcher, our creative director, could transform the vaguest concept into stunning visuals that told a story without words. She'd been with me for 4 years, turning down offers from bigger agencies because she believed in what we were creating together. Jason Parker, our copywriter, had a gift for finding the perfect phrase that would stick in consumers' minds. His work had won us the Riverside Hotel chain account, a client that had tripled their marketing budget with us after seeing their bookings increase 30% in the first quarter of our campaign. Tara Collins, our account strategist, was the newest member at 2 years, but had quickly become invaluable for her ability to anticipate client needs before they even mentioned them. Together, we were unstoppable. Or so I thought. Julia Bennett arrived at Summit 3 months ago, with a dazzling smile and a resume that seemed almost too perfect. 26 years old with glossy dark hair and designer clothes, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. Derek Winters, our CEO, personally introduced her as our new senior marketing consultant, a position none of us had heard mentioned before. "Julia comes to us with exceptional experience," Derek announced during her introduction, his hand lingering on her shoulder. "She'll be working across all departments to optimize our strategies and bring fresh perspectives." I remembered exchanging a quick glance with Amanda. New positions typically went through a rigorous hiring committee, especially senior roles. Yet here was Julia, appearing as if by magic, with Derek's enthusiastic endorsement. Within days, the special treatment became impossible to ignore. Julia had been given the corner office that had stood empty since our former vice president retired. She attended executive meetings that even I wasn't invited to. Derek began taking her to client lunches, something he rarely did with any of us. When she presented ideas in meetings, Derek nodded enthusiastically regardless of their merit, while our suggestions received increased scrutiny. "We need to innovate," became his constant refrain whenever we presented strategies that had proven successful in the past. Yet when Julia suggested nearly identical approaches, they were brilliant and exactly what we need. The worst was watching her mediocre work receive lavish praise while our team's exceptional efforts went unacknowledged. We stayed late perfecting the Greenfield Sports campaign, creating custom animations and personalized content strategies for each of their 15 locations. Julia showed up to the presentation having contributed nothing, yet Derek praised her oversight as crucial to the project's success. But nothing prepared us for that Monday morning meeting 3 weeks after Julia arrived. The entire marketing department sat in the glass-walled conference room as Derek called for our attention, Julia standing beside him with a satisfied smile. "I've been reviewing our department's performance," Derek began, scanning the room. "And I've realized we need to make some adjustments in how we approach our clients and our creative process." He gestured toward Julia. "Julia has brought a level of excellence and innovation that represents the future of Summit. Her approach to the Westridge account has already increased their engagement metrics by 40%. My stomach dropped. Westridge had been my client for 3 years. I'd never even seen Julia interact with them. "I want everyone to look at Julia's work as the gold standard," Derek continued, his arm now around her shoulders. "She's our future, not you all clinging to outdated methods." The room fell silent. 20 people who had poured years into building Summit sat stunned as Derek essentially declared our work worthless compared to this newcomer. I kept my composure through the rest of the meeting, somehow managing to ask relevant questions about upcoming projects while my insides churned with hurt and confusion. It was only afterward, checking my email, that I discovered the final blow: Horizon Brands, my biggest client. The account I had personally brought in and nurtured for 3 years had been reassigned to Julia without so much as a notification to me. The email from Derek was brief. Julia will be taking over Horizon effective immediately. Transfer all relevant files and brief her by end of day. I stared at my computer screen in disbelief, then quietly walked to the bathroom where I could process this betrayal in private, away from curious eyes and Julia's triumphant smile. The following weeks tested every ounce of professionalism I possessed. Each morning, I arrived at work with a knot in my stomach, forcing a smile as I passed Julia's new corner office where she often sat with her door open, loudly discussing her clients on speakerphone. My team felt the shift too. Resources we'd previously had access to became suddenly unavailable. The additional designer we'd been promised for the Carson project was assigned to Julia instead. The monthly budget for digital advertising tools was cut for our team, but expanded for projects under Julia's supervision. We need to stay focused on what we can control, I told Amanda, Jason, and Tara during our morning huddle, trying to maintain morale despite the obvious favoritism. Our work speaks for itself. But increasingly, we weren't even given the opportunity to speak. Meetings we'd always attended were rescheduled without our knowledge. Strategy sessions happened without our input. Decision-makers who once sought our counsel now deferred to Julia, despite her limited experience with our industry and clients. What troubled me most were the inconsistencies I began noticing in Julia's supposed expertise. During a presentation on social media strategy, she confidently declared that Instagram stories had a 48-hour lifespan instead of 24. When Jason politely corrected her, she brushed it off as a regional difference in how the platform operated, which made absolutely no sense. Yet Derek nodded along as if she'd said something profound. In another instance, she presented campaign metrics using outdated benchmarks that anyone with current industry knowledge would know were irrelevant. When I provided the current standards, Derek accused me of nitpicking and undermining team cohesion. The situation with Horizon Brands particularly pained me. I'd won their business when they were a small regional company with ambitious goals. Together, we'd crafted campaigns that helped them expand to 12 states. Their marketing director, Brian, had become more than a client. He was a valued professional connection who trusted my judgment. Now, I watched from the sidelines as Julia took credit for strategies I'd developed, presenting them as her own innovations during client calls. After one particularly frustrating week, I decided to voice my concerns to our HR director, Grace Thompson. Grace and I had always had a cordial relationship, occasionally meeting for coffee to discuss department dynamics and professional development opportunities. "I appreciate you bringing these concerns to me, Peggy," Grace said after I explained the situation, her expression carefully neutral. "But I have to be honest, this sounds like jealousy." I felt my cheeks flush with indignation. This isn't about jealousy. It's about fairness and accuracy. Julia is taking credit for work she didn't do, and making claims that aren't true. Grace sighed. Derek has made it clear that Julia is implementing a new vision for the company. Change is always difficult, especially for those who've been comfortable in their positions for a long time. I left her office feeling worse than when I'd entered. Not only were my concerns dismissed, but I'd been characterized as resistant to change and jealous of younger talent, neither of which reflected my actual concerns. The following day, Tara rushed to my desk, her voice low. "Something weird is happening with our client files." She explained that she'd tried to access the presentation deck for Blue Sky Technologies, another long-standing client, only to find that all their files had been moved to a different server with restricted permissions. When I called IT to ask about it, they said the change was requested by upper management, Tara said. "We no longer have editing rights to our own client files." Similar stories began emerging from other team members. Jason found that his login credentials no longer worked for several accounts we managed. Amanda discovered that design templates she'd created were now password protected, with access denied to her. By the third week of Julia's reign as Derek's golden child, we were effectively being locked out of our own work, piece by piece. The breaking point came when I overheard Julia on the phone in the break room, unaware of my presence around the corner. "Everything's progressing perfectly," she said to someone in a hushed voice. "They have no idea. I've already secured the Horizon data and the Blue Sky materials. The Westridge campaign strategy is exactly what we need for the Henderson pitch." I froze. Henderson Group was not our client. They were a prospective client that Summit had been trying to land for months, and the way Julia spoke about securing client data sounded strange and concerning. When she ended her call and spotted me, her expression flickered momentarily before settling into her usual confident smile. "Peggy, I didn't see you there. How's everything going with the, projects you still have?" The condescension in her tone was unmistakable. I maintained my composure, simply nodding and continuing to prepare my coffee. But inside, alarm bells were ringing. The next day, I requested a private meeting with Derek. Despite my growing suspicions about Julia, I still believed that a direct, professional conversation might clear the air and address the increasingly toxic workplace dynamics. Derek's assistant scheduled me for the last slot on Friday afternoon, 4:30 p.m., when most executives would be heading home for the weekend. The message was clear. My concerns were an afterthought. When I finally sat across from him in his spacious office, overlooking the Seattle skyline, Derek didn't even look up from his computer for the first minute. "What's so urgent, Peggy?" he finally asked, his tone making it clear he considered this an imposition. I took a deep breath and laid out my concerns as objectively as possible. The reassignment of clients without consultation, the restricted access to files we'd created, the inconsistencies in Julia's supposed expertise, and the general atmosphere of confusion and favoritism that was affecting team morale. Derek leaned back in his chair, regarding me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "You know, Peggy, I've always valued your contributions to Summit. But business evolves, and so must we. Julia represents fresh thinking and modern approaches that, frankly, some of our more established team members struggle to embrace. This isn't about resistance to new ideas," I countered. "It's about professional integrity and fair treatment of the team that's built Summit's reputation." Derek's expression hardened. "I think what's really happening here is that you're feeling threatened by someone younger and more innovative. It happens to many professionals at your stage." My stage? I was 32, hardly ready for retirement. "If I were you," Derek continued, his voice taking on a note of finality, "I'd start looking for other opportunities. Summit is moving in a new direction, and it might not be the right fit for you anymore." I left his office in shock. After 5 years of dedication and measurable success, I'd been essentially told to quit because I questioned the preferential treatment of a newcomer with questionable credentials. Little did I know that Derek's thinly veiled suggestion to leave would soon become a forced reality for my entire team. The atmosphere at Summit deteriorated rapidly after my confrontation with Derek. The division between Julia's circle and everyone else became impossible to ignore. People who aligned themselves with her suddenly received choice assignments and positive performance reviews. Those who questioned her methods or maintained loyalty to established teams found themselves increasingly marginalized. I did my best to shield Amanda, Jason, and Tara from the worst of it, taking on difficult conversations with Derek myself and redistributing our dwindling resources to ensure they could still produce quality work. But the strain showed on all of us. Dark circles under eyes, hushed conversations that stopped when certain people walked by, forced smiles in the break room. 2 weeks after my meeting with Derek, Julia began openly taking credit for my past campaigns during client presentations. As you can see from the success of my strategy with Riverside Hotels, she said during a department showcase, clicking through slides that displayed work, my team had completed 6 months before she even joined the company. I sat silently, feeling Amanda tense beside me as Julia detailed her creative direction on designs Amanda had spent weeks perfecting. Later that day, I discovered that someone had accessed my personal drive where I kept drafts of proposals and campaign strategies. Files had been viewed and copied during hours when I wasn't in the office. When I reported this to IT, they informed me that the access had been authorized by executive management. "But those are my work product documents," I protested. The IT specialist, a newer employee I didn't recognize, simply shrugged. "All company content belongs to Summit. If management authorizes access, there's nothing we can do." The invasion felt personal, but it wasn't just happening to me. Jason found entire sections of copy he'd written for an upcoming campaign, appearing verbatim in presentations Julia delivered, with only the slightest modifications to claim as her own. Amanda discovered that unique design elements she'd created for our clients were being repurposed in Julia's portfolios, with no attribution. "She's literally stealing our work," Amanda whispered during a quick lunch at the sandwich shop across from our building. The four of us had taken to meeting outside the office to speak freely. "The gradient technique I developed for Carson Industries?" She presented it to the executive team as her signature style. "That took me weeks to perfect," Tara nodded grimly. "Brian from Horizon called me yesterday, confused about why their strategy documents included references to a competitor's metrics. Julia had apparently merged our Horizon strategy with elements from another client's campaign without realizing the inconsistencies. She doesn't understand the work well enough to steal it properly," Jason added, his usual humor darkened by frustration. "I saw her and Derek having dinner at Lucia's last night," Amanda said quietly. Lucia's was an upscale Italian restaurant downtown, known for its private dining rooms and $200 wine bottles. They didn't look like they were discussing business. The implication hung in the air. Was Julia's special treatment the result of something more personal than professional admiration? I pushed the thought aside. Regardless of what might be happening between Derek and Julia outside of work, my concern was the integrity of our professional environment and the increasing evidence that something unethical was occurring with client information. Back at the office, I began documenting everything. I created a secure spreadsheet tracking instances of work appropriation, noting dates, files affected, and witnesses. I saved screenshots of file access logs that showed unusual activity, midnight downloads of client databases, mass copying of strategy documents, folders being moved to secure servers we couldn't access. I wasn't sure what I was building a case for exactly. HR had already made it clear they sided with Derek. The board of directors rarely involved themselves in departmental issues. But I couldn't stand by while years of our hard work was stolen and our professional reputations potentially damaged by association with whatever Julia was doing. 3 days later, on a quiet Thursday afternoon, our team received simultaneous calendar invites to a Monday morning meeting titled Departmental Restructuring Discussion. The invite came from Derek's assistant and included the entire marketing department. "This can't be good," Jason said, poking his head into my office, his face pale. I tried to reassure him and the others, suggesting it might be a genuine reorganization to clarify roles after weeks of confusion. But none of us believed it. The writing had been on the wall since Julia arrived, and now it seemed the other shoe was about to drop. The weekend was torture. We exchanged anxious texts, analyzing every recent interaction for clues about what Monday might bring. I barely slept Sunday night, rehearsing what I would say if given the opportunity to speak during the meeting, how I would defend my team's contributions, and question the sudden changes that had undermined our previously successful department. By the time Monday morning arrived, the tension was unbearable. I arrived early, hoping to gather my thoughts in the quiet of my office before facing whatever Derek had planned. But when I tried my keycard at the main entrance, the reader flashed red instead of green, denied access. I stared at it in disbelief, trying again with the same result, when the security guard approached from inside. "Miss Walker? They've asked me to escort you to the 14th floor conference room." Being escorted by security to a meeting in your own workplace is a special kind of humiliation. By the time I reached the conference room, my hands were shaking with a mixture of anxiety and anger. Inside, I found my teammates and the rest of the marketing department seated around the large table, expressions ranging from confusion to resignation. Derek and Julia stood at the head of the room, alongside someone from HR I didn't recognize. The conference room had been set up differently than usual. On the table in front of each seat was a manila folder, a document with Summit's letterhead visible inside. Against the wall near the door stood 3 security personnel and 2 people wearing badges from an external IT firm. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a restructuring. This was an execution. "Thank you all for coming in this morning," Derek began once everyone was seated, his voice carrying the forced solemnity of someone performing regret rather than feeling it. "I know change is difficult, but in business, we sometimes need to make hard decisions for the company's future success." Julia stood slightly behind him, her expression a carefully constructed mask of professional sympathy that didn't reach her eyes. "After extensive analysis of our departmental structure and future needs," Derek continued, "we've determined that a significant restructuring is necessary to position Summit for continued growth in our evolving industry." He paused, scanning the room as if waiting for his corporate doublespeak to sink in. "The folders in front of you contain individualized information about this transition. For most of you, today will be your last day with Summit Creative Solutions." A collective intake of breath filled the room. Despite our fears and suspicions, hearing the words spoken aloud was still a shock. Tara, seated beside me, reached for my hand under the table, her fingers ice cold. "You'll have 30 minutes to collect personal belongings from your workspaces. The security team will escort you to ensure a smooth transition. All company devices should be left on your desks. Your final paycheck will include 2 weeks severance, and your health benefits will continue until the end of the month." As Derek droned on about career transition resources and appreciating your past contributions, I opened the folder in front of me. Inside was a termination letter stating that my position had been eliminated due to departmental restructuring, effective immediately. Attached was a legal document requiring my signature to receive severance, including clauses about non-disparagement and waiving the right to legal action against Summit. I looked up to see Julia now standing at Derek's side, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth as she surveyed the shocked faces around the table. "Julia will be leading our new streamlined marketing division," Derek announced, his hand resting on her shoulder. "She has demonstrated exceptional vision and leadership since joining Summit, and I'm confident she'll guide our marketing strategies to new heights." From across the table, I caught Amanda's eye. Her expression mirrored what I was feeling, a mixture of disbelief, anger, and dawning comprehension. This had been the plan all along. Julia hadn't been hired to complement our team. She'd been brought in to replace us after taking everything she could from our work. The 30 minutes we were given to clear out our desks was both too long and not nearly enough. Under the watchful eye of a security guard, I numbly packed my personal items into a cardboard box provided by HR framed photos of family, the small plant my niece had given me last birthday, a few books, the coffee mug from our team retreat to Lake Tahoe last year. 5 years of professional life reduced to a single box. The most painful part was passing Julia's office on my way out. She sat there making phone calls, already contacting our former clients to announce her new leadership role, not even bothering to close her door as 20 colleagues were escorted out of the building. In the parking lot, our team gathered in a tight circle, still processing what had happened. Tears flowed freely now that we were away from watchful eyes. We exchanged phone numbers and home addresses, promising to stay in touch and help each other find new positions. "This isn't right," Jason said, his voice thick with emotion. "They can't just throw us away after everything we've built." "They just did," Amanda replied bitterly, struggling to fit her portfolio case into her compact car. Tara hugged each of us fiercely. "We'll be okay. We're good at what we do. Better than good. There are plenty of agencies that would be lucky to have any one of us." I nodded, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. "Let's meet for dinner this weekend. We'll come up with a plan." But as I drove home in the late morning traffic, the shock gave way to a crushing sense of loss. My career at Summit had been more than just a job. It had been my professional identity, the place where I'd grown from an eager associate to a respected director. The campaigns I'd led, the relationships I'd built with clients, the team I'd mentored, all of it had been stripped away in a 30-minute meeting. At home, I placed my sad little box of office belongings in the corner of my living room and sat on the couch, staring at the wall. For the first time since the whole Julia situation began, I allowed myself to cry freely deep, racking sobs that left me exhausted. The next days passed in a blur of numbness and frantic activity. I updated my resume, reached out to industry contacts, applied for open positions that seemed even remotely suitable. I received kind but non-committal responses. "We'll keep your resume on file. Nothing open right now, but things change quickly." The standard phrases that meant nothing. Each night, I checked social media to see Summit announcing exciting new directions under Julia's leadership. Each morning, I woke with a knot of anxiety in my stomach, wondering how long my savings would last and whether my career would ever recover from this setback. By Friday, depression had settled in like an unwelcome houseguest. I'd stopped bothering to get fully dressed, working on job applications in sweatpants and yesterday's t-shirt. The weekend dinner I'd suggested to my former teammates felt like too much effort now. What would we even talk about? How our lives had been upended? How unfair everything was? Then my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, assuming it was another recruiter who would take my information and never call back. But some small spark of hope made me pick up. "Peggy? This is Will Tucker from IT at Summit." Will had been with Summit's technology department for years, though we'd rarely interacted directly. He handled server security and systems architecture, working mostly behind the scenes. "I'm not supposed to be calling you," he continued, his voice low, as if worried about being overheard. "But something's not right with Julia, and what happened to your team? I've been tracking some suspicious activity on our servers, and I think you should know about it." I sat up straighter, fully alert for the first time in days. "What kind of suspicious activity? I can't talk about it over the phone. Can we meet somewhere? Tomorrow morning?" We arranged to meet at a coffee shop in a neighboring town, far enough from Summit's offices to avoid accidental encounters with current employees. As I hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Monday's devastating meeting. A flicker of purpose. Whatever Will had discovered, it confirmed what my instincts had been telling me all along. Julia wasn't just an office politician who had charmed her way into Derek's good graces. Something more sinister was happening. And finally, someone else had noticed. The coffee shop Will chose was a small, independent place tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing boutique. I arrived 15 minutes early, selecting a table in the back corner where we could talk without being easily overheard. Nervous energy had replaced my depression, and I'd already consumed 1 cup of strong coffee by the time Will arrived, carrying a worn laptop bag and looking over his shoulder as he entered. "Thanks for coming," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. Will was in his early 40s with thinning hair and the pallor of someone who spent most of his time under fluorescent lights. "I wasn't sure if you would. You said something's not right with Julia. After what happened, I'd say that's an understatement." Will glanced around before opening his laptop. "I've worked in IT security for 15 years. When something doesn't feel right on my network, I pay attention." He turned the screen toward me, showing what looked like logs of server activity. "These are access records from our secure client database. Each entry shows who accessed files when and what they did with them." He scrolled through pages of technical data before stopping at a highlighted section. 3 weeks ago, I noticed unusual download patterns happening at odd hours, mostly between midnight and 4 in the morning. Large batches of client files being copied to external drives. Who was accessing them? I asked, leaning closer. That's where it gets interesting. The credentials used belonged to Derek, but the access point wasn't his office computer or home IP address. It was a new laptop issued to Julia when she started. I felt a chill. She was using Derek's login? Will nodded. Either he gave her his credentials, which violates every security protocol we have, or she somehow obtained them without his knowledge. Given how he's been acting, I'd bet on the first option, I said bitterly. Maybe, but there's more. Will pulled up another screen showing email logs. I also found evidence of large file transfers being sent to external email addresses not associated with any of our clients or vendors. He pointed to one address in particular, j.bennett@crosscurrent.com. The name hit me like a physical blow. Crosscurrent? As in Crosscurrent Media? They're our biggest competitor. Will nodded grimly. Exactly. And when I did some digging into Julia's background check, guess what I found? She worked at Crosscurrent for 3 years before coming to Summit. My mind raced, connecting dots that had been floating just beyond my awareness. The inconsistencies in Julia's supposed expertise, the strange phone conversation I'd overheard about securing client data, her immediate access to confidential materials and executive meetings. She's a corporate spy, I whispered, the realization both shocking and somehow not surprising at all. She was hired to steal our client information and strategies. That's my theory, Will confirmed. And based on the volume of data she's extracted, she's been incredibly successful. Does Derek know? Is he part of this? Will hesitated. I'm not sure. The evidence suggests he at least provided his credentials, which would make him complicit. But whether he understands the full extent of what she's doing, he shrugged. That I don't know. I sat back, processing this revelation. Why are you telling me this? You're still employed there. You're taking a huge risk. Will's expression hardened. Because it's wrong. I've been at Summit for 9 years. What happened to your team to all of you was bad enough. But corporate espionage? That crosses a line I can't ignore. I reached for my phone. We need to tell the others. Amanda, Jason, Tara, they deserve to know what really happened. Within hours, we had reconvened our team at my apartment, where Will repeated his findings. The initial shock gave way to a complex mixture of vindication and renewed anger. I knew something was off about her, Amanda said, pacing my living room. But this is criminal, right? Like, actual breaking the law criminal. Absolutely, Jason agreed. Corporate espionage, theft of intellectual property, unauthorized access to secure systems. These are serious offenses. Tara, always the most practical, asked the question we were all thinking. So what do we do with this information? Go to the police? Will shook his head. Corporate espionage cases are complicated. Without official access to Summit systems, we don't have enough concrete evidence for law enforcement to act quickly. By the time they investigate, Julia and Derek could delete everything incriminating. What about the Summit Board of Directors, I suggested. Derek answers to them, if they knew what was happening. That could work, Will said, nodding slowly. The board would have both the authority and motivation to take immediate action. We spent the next several hours developing a plan. Will would continue monitoring server activity, documenting every unauthorized access and file transfer. Meanwhile, we would each investigate different aspects of the situation. Jason took on researching Julia's background beyond what Will had already uncovered. If she lied about her credentials or experience, that's another piece of evidence against her. Amanda volunteered to reach out to her industry contacts to verify Julia's claimed accomplishments and past work. Her portfolio seemed too perfect. I bet half those campaigns don't exist or weren't actually created by her. Tara, who had always been meticulous about keeping backup files, revealed she had copies of our original work on her personal drive. I always saved versions before client revisions, just to have a clean copy for my portfolio. We can use these to prove she stole our work. I would compile everything into a comprehensive presentation for the board, focusing on the damage to Summit's reputation and client relationships if this espionage became public knowledge. We created a secure messaging group to share findings and set up a shared drive where we could safely store evidence. Will provided us with secure login credentials and taught us basic operational security to ensure our investigation wouldn't be discovered. Over the next week, the pieces came together alarmingly quickly. Jason discovered that Julia had worked for Crosscurrent Media until just 2 weeks before joining Summit, not the year of independent consulting her Summit bio claimed. Amanda learned from former colleagues that Julia had been involved in at least 2 other situations where she had briefly worked for agencies before they mysteriously lost major clients to Crosscurrent. But the smoking gun came from Tara's methodical comparison of our original strategy documents with new campaigns Crosscurrent had recently launched. The similarities were undeniable: identical market analyses, similar creative approaches, even the same unusual phrases in some marketing copy. They had barely bothered to disguise the stolen work. "Look at this," Tara said during our third strategy session, pulling up 2 campaign websites side by side on her laptop. "This is our Westridge campaign from 6 months ago, and this is Crosscurrent's new launch for Henderson Group." The similarities were striking, from color schemes to content structure to the central campaign message. Henderson Group, I remembered with a jolt, was the potential client I'd overheard Julia mentioning on the phone. "They're literally using our playbook to pitch to clients we were targeting," I said, the full scope of the betrayal becoming clear. Julia wasn't just stealing existing client information, she was taking our new business strategies too. Will's monitoring had revealed even more concerning patterns. "She's accelerated her activities in the past few days," he reported. "Massive downloads of client databases, strategy documents, financial information. She's taking everything that isn't nailed down." As we prepared our case for the Summit board, news broke that left us stunned. Summit Creative Solutions was announcing a strategic partnership with Henderson Group, a major potential client we'd been pursuing for months. "That's impossible," Jason said, staring at the press release. "We never landed Henderson. They were still in the pitching phase when we left." "They weren't partnering with us," I realized aloud. "They were working with Julia using our stolen strategies to land the client." The timeline suddenly compressed. If Summit and Henderson were announcing a partnership, the deals were already in motion. We needed to act immediately before more damage was done. Through a former mentor, Amanda secured a meeting with Patricia Lowenstein, the chairperson of Summit's board of directors, for the following morning. As we finalized our presentation late into the night, I felt a mix of determination and anxiety. "Are we really doing this?" Tara asked quietly as we saved the final version of our presentation. "Going up against Derek and Julia could make us unhireable in this industry if it backfires." Jason nodded soberly. "It's a risk, but can any of us really walk away knowing what they're doing?" Amanda squeezed Tara's hand. "We're not just doing this for ourselves. What about all the clients whose confidential information is being stolen? What about the other Summit employees whose jobs might be at risk when this scheme eventually collapses?" I looked at my team. These people who had become more than colleagues over the years, and at Will, who had risked his own position to expose the truth. "We're doing the right thing," I said with more confidence than I felt. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we'll face it together." That night, as I lay in bed rehearsing what I would say to the board, my phone buzzed with a news alert. I clicked on it and sat bolt upright, sleep forgotten. The headline read, "Summit Creative Solutions announces groundbreaking new campaign approach. Industry experts skeptical of claims." The article detailed how Summit was promoting an innovative marketing methodology, one that was identical to a proprietary approach my team had been developing for months before our termination. Julia was quoted extensively, claiming credit for the innovative strategy and promising revolutionary results for clients. They weren't just stealing our past work, they were now building Summit's future on our stolen innovations, with potentially disastrous consequences when the truth eventually emerged. Our meeting with the board couldn't come soon enough. The Summit Creative Solutions headquarters occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming downtown office tower. As our group passed through the revolving doors into the marble lobby the next morning, I felt a surreal sense of displacement. Just 10 days earlier, I had swiped my badge at these security turnstiles without a second thought, rushing to my office with a coffee in hand, mind already racing with the day's priorities. Now, we were visitors, required to sign in and receive temporary badges, escorted by security to the executive floor where the boardroom awaited. We had dressed carefully for this meeting, professional attire that projected confidence and credibility. I wore the navy suit I'd saved for client presentations, with a crisp white blouse and minimal jewelry. Tara had organized our presentation materials into professionally bound portfolios for each board member, with USB drives containing all our digital evidence. Will had taken a personal day to join us, though he entered the building separately to avoid raising suspicions. As Summit's current IT security manager, his testimony would be crucial to our case. The elevator ride to the 18th floor felt endless. We stood silently, each lost in our own thoughts, the weight of what we were about to do settling heavily on our shoulders. When the doors finally opened, Patricia Lowenstein's assistant was waiting for us. Miss Lowenstein and the board members are assembled in the main conference room, she informed us, her expression neutral but curious. It wasn't every day that recently terminated employees returned for a private meeting with the board chairperson. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see 7 people seated around the massive table, the complete Summit Board of Directors. Patricia Lowenstein, a formidable woman in her early 60s with silver hair and penetrating blue eyes, sat at the head of the table. She had built Summit from a small creative shop into a regional powerhouse before stepping back into the chairperson role 5 years ago, leaving day-to-day operations to executives like Derek. My heart nearly stopped when I saw who else was in the room. Derek himself, standing near the windows, looking confused and irritated by our presence. Julia was not present, thankfully, but Derek's unexpected attendance threatened to derail our carefully planned presentation. "Miss Walker," Patricia greeted me with a firm handshake as we entered. "I understand you and your colleagues have an urgent matter to discuss with the board." "Yes, we do," I confirmed, trying to project calm confidence despite Derek's glare from across the room. "Thank you for making time to see us. I don't understand why terminated employees are being given access to the board," Derek interrupted, stepping forward. "If they have grievances about their separation, the proper channel is through HR, not a direct appeal to the board of directors." Patricia raised her hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "Derek, you were invited to this meeting as a courtesy since it concerns your department, but the decision to hear Miss Walker and her team was mine, and the board unanimously agreed." She turned back to us. "Please, begin your presentation." Derek's face flushed with anger, but he took a seat at the far end of the table, arms crossed defensively. I took a deep breath and began. "Board members, we're here today because we've uncovered evidence of corporate espionage and intellectual property theft occurring at Summit Creative Solutions. This isn't about our termination or seeking to reverse that decision. This is about protecting Summit's reputation, client relationships, and proprietary information from a coordinated attack." For the next 40 minutes, we methodically presented our evidence, each team member handling different aspects of the case. I outlined the timeline of Julia's arrival, the unusual access she was granted, and the systematic way our team had been sidelined and eventually eliminated once she had extracted what she needed from our work. Will presented the server logs and access records showing the pattern of late-night file transfers and unauthorized downloads, all traced back to Julia's devices using Derek's login credentials. Jason detailed Julia's actual employment history with Cross-Current Media and the suspicious timing of her departure from their company just days before joining Summit. Amanda showed side-by-side comparisons of our original work and the new campaigns Julia had presented, highlighting the unmistakable similarities and direct copying of unique creative elements. Tara revealed the most damning evidence, screenshots and documentation showing Cross-Current Media using strategies and creative approaches identical to those developed by our team at Summit, including for campaigns that had not yet been publicly launched. Throughout our presentation, the board members listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Patricia took detailed notes, her expression growing increasingly grave. Derek shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his initial defiance giving way to visible anxiety as the evidence mounted. "And finally," I concluded, pulling up the news article from the previous night, Summit has just announced a revolutionary new marketing approach that Julia claims to have developed. This methodology is identical to the proprietary system our team spent 6 months creating before our termination. We have dated documentation proving we originated this approach, which is now being used as the centerpiece of Summit's partnership with Henderson Group. A heavy silence fell over the room as I finished speaking. The board members exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of shock and concern. "These are extremely serious allegations," Patricia said finally. "If even half of what you've presented is accurate, Summit is facing a significant crisis." Derek suddenly stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is absurd! These are the desperate accusations of disgruntled former employees trying to damage the company that let them go. Julia Bennett is a talented professional who has revitalized our creative approach and brought in valuable new business. And how do you explain the server logs showing files being accessed under your credentials in the middle of the night?" Patricia asked calmly. "Or the documented evidence of Summit's proprietary strategies appearing in Cross-Current Media's campaigns?" "I'm not an IT expert," Derek blustered. "Those logs could be manipulated. And similar campaign strategies happen all the time in our industry. There's nothing unusual about—" He was interrupted by a knock at the door. Patricia's assistant entered, looking apologetic for the interruption. "I'm sorry, but there's an urgent situation developing. Julia Bennett is currently removing items from the building. Security tried to stop her when they noticed external hard drives among her belongings, but she claimed they were approved by Mr. Winters. They're holding her in the lobby." Derek's face drained of color. Patricia turned to the board member beside her, a former federal prosecutor. "Call building security. No one leaves with any electronic devices or documents. Then contact our legal team. We need them here immediately." To Derek, she said, "I suggest you remain here while we sort this out." The next 2 hours unfolded like a scene from a corporate thriller. Security footage showed Julia attempting to leave the building with multiple external hard drives and a laptop that wasn't issued by Summit. When security personnel had questioned her, she had claimed she was taking work home with Derek's permission, but her nervous behavior and insistence on leaving immediately had raised red flags. The company's legal team arrived and began a preliminary review of our evidence. Meanwhile, an emergency IT audit confirmed Will's findings about unauthorized access and file transfers, revealing even more extensive theft than we had discovered. By mid-afternoon, Julia had been detained in a conference room with Summit's legal counsel and a digital forensics expert examining her devices. Derek remained in the boardroom, now clearly in damage control mode, as the evidence against him mounted. Patricia called us back in for a follow-up discussion, her expression grave but determined. "First, I want to thank you all for bringing this to our attention," she began. "Your courage and integrity in the face of personal and professional risk is commendable." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "Our initial investigation confirms your allegations. Julia Bennett appears to have been engaged in a systematic effort to extract Summit's intellectual property and client information. The digital forensics team has already recovered emails between her and executives at Cross-Current Media, discussing the theft and how the materials would be used." "And Derek?" I asked, unable to help myself. Patricia's expression hardened. "The evidence of his involvement is also compelling. Whether he was a knowing participant or merely negligent in his oversight responsibilities is still being determined. Either way, his position at Summit is now under review." "What happens next?" Amanda asked. "Our legal team is preparing to take immediate action against both Julia Bennett and Cross-Current Media for corporate espionage, theft of intellectual property, and breach of contract. As for Derek Winters," she sighed, "that situation will be addressed by the board this afternoon." "And what about our team?" Jason asked quietly. "The clients and accounts we managed? The campaigns that were stolen?" Patricia regarded us thoughtfully. "That's something I'd like to discuss with all of you, if you're willing to stay a bit longer. Summit has clearly made a serious error in judgment, and we have some decisions to make about how to move forward." As we nodded our agreement to continue the conversation, I felt a profound shift taking place. What had begun, as an effort to expose wrongdoing, had become an unexpected opportunity to reclaim not just our professional dignity, but perhaps our place at Summit itself. The saga that had started with public humiliation and unjust termination was approaching a resolution none of us could have anticipated. And while many questions remained unanswered, one thing was becoming increasingly clear: truth and integrity, even in the cutthroat world of corporate competition, still mattered. 6 months after that pivotal board meeting, I stood in Summit's newly renovated main conference room, watching the morning sunlight stream through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The Seattle skyline stretched before me, familiar yet somehow new, just like Summit itself. So much had changed since that day when my team and I had presented our evidence to Patricia Lowenstein and the board of directors. The immediate aftermath had been intense. Julia was escorted from the building and immediately terminated. The digital forensics team recovered overwhelming evidence of her systematic theft, including emails with cross-current executives detailing exactly which Summit clients and strategies they planned to target. Derek's fate was decided the same day. Once confronted with the server logs showing his credentials had been used to access confidential information at 3 a.m. when he was demonstrably at home, he crumbled. He admitted to giving Julia his login information to help her get up to speed quickly, but claimed ignorance about her true intentions. That story held until the forensic team found emails between them, discussing compensation arrangements once certain clients moved to cross-current. Derek hadn't just been manipulated by Julia, he had been an active participant in the scheme, promised a lucrative position at cross-current once the plan was complete. Both were terminated for cause, their company devices and accounts immediately locked. Summit's legal team moved swiftly, filing lawsuits against them personally, as well as against cross-current media for corporate espionage, theft of intellectual property, and tortious interference with business relationships. The most surprising moment came the following day when Patricia Lowenstein herself called me. "Peggy, I owe you and your team an apology," she said, her voice carrying genuine regret. "What happened to you was inexcusable, and I take responsibility for not providing better oversight of Derek's activities. The board would like to meet with you all again, not about Julia and Derek this time, but about Summit's future." That meeting changed everything. Patricia explained that Summit faced a serious crisis. With Derek and Julia gone, the marketing department was in disarray. Clients were confused and concerned about the sudden leadership changes. Campaigns were stalled mid-development. Employees were anxious and demoralized. "We need to rebuild not just our marketing department, but trust with our clients, our employees, and the industry," Patricia explained. "And we believe you and your team are exactly the people to help us do that." The offer was unexpected and not without complications. Summit proposed bringing us back with increased compensation, leadership roles, and a formal apology for our wrongful termination. More significantly, they wanted to create a new division focused on creative integrity and client relationship management, with me as its director. My team and I took a weekend to consider the offer, meeting at my apartment to weigh our options honestly. We had all started exploring other opportunities, with Tara already receiving a competitive offer from a smaller agency across town. "Can we really go back after everything that happened?" Amanda wondered aloud. "Won't it be awkward? Will people respect us or resent us?" Jason nodded. "And how can we trust that this won't happen again?" Different players, same game. Their concerns were valid. Trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired. Yet there was something compelling about the opportunity to return to Summit on our own terms, to help rebuild what had been damaged, and to implement safeguards to prevent similar situations in the future. "I think we could do amazing work," I said finally. "Not just picking up where we left off, but creating something better. A department built on real values, where good work and integrity are what matter most." In the end, we decided to accept Summit's offer, with some additional conditions: a seat for me on the executive leadership team, complete autonomy in rebuilding our department, and a commitment from the board to implement stronger oversight and ethics policies throughout the company. The 6 months that followed were both challenging and deeply rewarding. We returned to Summit not as victims seeking redemption, but as leaders driving positive change. The marketing department was restructured with our team at its core, bringing back trusted former colleagues and hiring new talent who shared our values of creativity and integrity. Rebuilding client relationships proved particularly challenging. Some clients had already begun moving their business elsewhere after the disruption and negative publicity surrounding Julia and Derek's departure. Others were wary, uncertain whether Summit could still deliver the quality and consistency they expected. We approached each client relationship with transparency and humility. I personally visited our major clients, acknowledging the recent turmoil, explaining the changes we were implementing, and presenting clear strategies for moving forward. Slowly but surely, trust began to return. Even Horizon Brands, which had been on the verge of leaving, recommitted to Summit after seeing our new direction and leadership. Within the company, we implemented systems to prevent another Julia situation. Stronger information security protocols, regular audits of access permissions, clear guidelines for bringing in senior personnel, and transparent paths for addressing concerns about workplace conduct. The lawsuit against Crosscurrent Media was settled out of court, with a substantial payment to Summit and a public acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Julia and Derek were facing their own legal troubles, including potential criminal charges for computer fraud and theft of trade secrets. Today, as I prepared to welcome a new group of employees to Summit, I reflected on how this painful journey had transformed not just our careers, but our understanding of professional integrity and resilience. Amanda entered the conference room, carrying a tray of welcome packets for the new hires. They're all gathered in the lobby. Looks like a promising group. Jason and Tara followed, having just finished setting up the presentation. Tara had ultimately decided to stay with us rather than accepting the other agency's offer, a decision she called choosing family over a slightly better parking spot. "Ready for this?" Jason asked me with a smile. I nodded, feeling a sense of purpose and optimism that had been absent during those dark days after our termination. More than ready. As the new employees filed in 8 bright, eager faces representing the future of Summit, I stepped forward to greet them. "Welcome to Summit Creative Solutions," I began, looking around at the diverse group of talented individuals we'd selected from hundreds of applicants. "My name is Peggy Walker, and I lead our Creative Integrity Division. I'm joined by our core leadership team, Amanda Fletcher, Jason Parker, and Tara Collins." I paused, considering how to frame what came next. These new team members deserved to understand the company they were joining, both its recent struggles and its commitment to something better. Summit has been through significant changes in the past year. Some of you may have heard stories about what happened here: the corporate espionage, the legal battles, the leadership changes. Those stories are part of our history, but they don't define our future. I gestured to my team, the people who had stood beside me through the darkest professional chapter of our lives and emerged stronger for it. What defines Summit today is a commitment to 3 core principles: creative excellence, professional integrity, and human connection. We believe that great work comes from people who are valued, respected, and empowered to speak truth even when it's difficult. We believe in giving credit where it's due and taking responsibility when things go wrong. And we believe that how we treat each other is just as important as the results we achieve. The new employees listened intently, some taking notes, others nodding along with my words. "You're joining Summit at an exciting time. Our client portfolio is stronger than ever. Our team is united around a shared vision. And most importantly, we've learned valuable lessons about what matters in building a sustainable creative culture." As the orientation continued, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had led us here. The public humiliation we'd experienced at Derek's hands, watching him elevate Julia as the company's golden future while dismissing our contributions, had been painful beyond words. The period of uncertainty after our termination had tested our confidence and resolve. But those experiences had also revealed the strength of our team bond, the value of our professional integrity, and our capacity for turning adversity into opportunity. In exposing Julia and Derek's scheme, we hadn't just reclaimed our own careers, We had potentially saved Summit itself from a crisis that could have destroyed the company and affected hundreds of employees. After the orientation concluded and the new team members departed for lunch with their department heads, I found myself alone in the conference room, looking out at the city below. My reflection in the glass was clear and confident, so different from that day in the office bathroom when I'd wiped away tears after Derek's crushing public critique. Patricia Lowenstein appeared in the doorway. "How did it go with the new group?" "Very well," I replied, turning to face her. "They're asking good questions, engaged, enthusiastic." She nodded, satisfaction evident in her expression. "The board reviewed the quarterly numbers yesterday. Client retention is up 17%. New business acquisitions have doubled since this time last year." She smiled. "Whatever you and your team are doing, it's working." "We're just creating the kind of workplace we always wanted," I said simply. "Where talent is recognized, ethics matter, and everyone has a voice." After Patricia left, my team rejoined me in the conference room for our afternoon planning session. As we discussed upcoming projects and client priorities, I was struck by how far we had come from those devastating days of rejection and uncertainty. The path to this moment had been neither straight nor easy. It had required courage to speak truth to power, resilience to weather professional setbacks, and faith in our own abilities when external validation was withdrawn. But the result, a stronger company built on genuine values, leadership roles that allowed us to shape the culture around us, and the satisfaction of seeing justice served made every difficult step worthwhile. In the end, Derek and Julia had indeed lost everything: their positions, their professional reputations, and potentially their freedom, depending on the outcome of the ongoing legal proceedings. But what we had gained was far more valuable than the satisfaction of seeing them face consequences. We had reclaimed not just our careers, but our confidence in the idea that integrity matters, that truth eventually emerges, and that standing together against wrongdoing can create positive change beyond what any of us could achieve alone. As we concluded our meeting and prepared to return to our respective departments, I felt compelled to acknowledge what we had accomplished together. "Before we go," I said, "I just want to say thank you for sticking together through everything, for believing in each other when no one else did, and for helping build something here that's actually worth being proud of." Amanda smiled. "From public humiliation to public vindication. Not a journey I'd want to repeat, but I wouldn't change where we ended up. Or who we ended up with," Tara added. Jason nodded in agreement. "So what's next for the dream team? World domination?" I laughed. "Let's start with next quarter's client presentations. World domination can wait until at least the new fiscal year." As we walked out together, I reflected on the lesson that had emerged from our ordeal. True success isn't built on shortcuts, deception, or undermining others. It comes from consistent integrity, genuine talent, and the courage to stand up for what's right, even when doing so carries personal risk. Derek and Julia had sought success through manipulation and theft, only to lose everything when their deception was exposed. We had faced our greatest professional setback with honesty and solidarity, ultimately creating something stronger and more meaningful than what we had lost. That knowledge that integrity eventually prevails, that unity creates strength, and that our professional worth transcends any single position or company's validation was perhaps the most valuable outcome of all. Have you ever had to stand up against workplace injustice or unethical behavior? The journey isn't easy, but as our story shows, speaking truth and maintaining your integrity can lead to unexpected opportunities and deeper professional relationships. I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might find strength in knowing that sometimes justice does prevail in the professional world. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, your worth isn't defined by how others treat you, but by how you respond when faced with adversity.